So the basic underlying truth is that the alpha spirit, the individual themselves, creates their own universe, their own mental and emotional states, their own automated mechanisms, and beyond this, even carries around an entire library of painful and undesirable mental images that requires suspending attention and free creative ability on the past in order to hold it there. So most of this now operates, of course, unknowingly. It's our complete beta defragmentation, procedural regimen is basically designed to bring, various areas of this back under an individual's knowing control. So that old library, or the library of old pictures that we're most concerned with when confronting the past, it essentially, the effects of these mental images only linger because they're the things that haven't been confronted. And of course, we just, again, compulsively keeping them around and so forth. So we want to be, we want to reach the point of knowing them and being able to create and destroy the mental imagery at will, and having no issue or qualm about that. So the alpha spirit carries pictures of incidents that have not been properly confronted, but that basically means the individual didn't fully face, the pain or the loss of what happened. And so now there's kind of like a lack of data in that area. But at the same time, the individual doesn't want it to happen again. And this puts them in a position where they're afraid to actually forget what happened, but at the same time still don't want to have to deal with it knowingly. And so this is how fragmentation forms, continuously creating a reactive image that is allowed to operate without knowingly, just looking at it or controlling it. So our earliest systematic approaches to this were quite effective, maybe a little incomplete, but those seekers that were using the information in the tablets of destiny in exclusion without the crystal clear companion volume, they tended to focus a bit too much attention on the vigorous, like erasing the pencil lines of fragmentation, metaphorically speaking, to the point where, again, as a metaphor, they were nearly tearing through the paper. So crystal clear was a significant improvement as a companion to the tablets of destiny material. But now the more recently developed approach, now we've got the Pathway to Ascension, the course we have now. It emphasizes increasing one's ability to simply confront the past incidents to a point where they're no longer, inhibiting or affecting, present or future considerations, and actions or creations and so forth. The pencil mark's no longer vivid or bold enough to affect whatever else we might do with the page, so to speak, because we used erasing the pencil mark as like an example before. Now it's been 5 years ago, but in Tablets of Destiny Revelation, again, all that material is still completely valid. It's just confronting. Tablets of Destiny Revelation volume was almost inherently all about targeting, confronting the past, and just imprints and fragmentation directly. And it required, we found, the crystal clear volume, particularly with solo, because everyone was doing it solo at the time. We talked a lot about traditional piloting and so forth, but it took years before we actually had, like, outside of the workshops, traditional professional piloting. And even today, it's not likely that most people have one yet in their, in their area that they live. So we're still working towards that, but that's why the emphasis, and rather than make that my priority, I spent a year looking at all of the material, and I spent all of 2023 looking at all of the systemology material and everything we had done and everything that was working, and this was all back when the Backtrack volume was coming out, and tried to develop this Pathway to Ascension course to make it more clean and concise, because we would never have been able to do this like this 5 years ago, but now it's accessible to us. So we're basically trying to, rather than just completely erase the past or erase this pencil mark or whatever, we're just trying to get an individual able to confront something to the point where now they could knowingly create it or not create it at will, but it otherwise really has no effect on them. And so the technique, the primary technique that we use for defragmenting the past, I'm going to go through it. I'm not going to write up all of the steps and everything. You're going to want to, at any rate, use the book material to when you do this. So Confronting the Past, Systemology Professional Course Booklet number 9, and it's lesson 9, or the first lesson in volume 2 of Pathway to Ascension, that 2-volume set. So whether we call it beta defragmentation or self-honesty, the state we're describing is the first stable point of metahumanism available to a seeker on the pathway. By this, we mean that it exceeds the limited range of parameters that we otherwise use to define the human condition. An individual is free from operating reactively based on past imprinting, is no longer a standard issue human. Our systematic approach works on a gradual or gradient basis, to reach this state. A seeker simply begins with lighter, easier to confront incidents before processing the more difficult ones. Doing this allows the seeker to gradually increase their actualized awareness and ability to confront the nature of existence as it is. And so the greater and deeper and older areas of the past can come into view for inspection. So now there's no reason to become overly concerned about searching for some ultimate incident or a single instance or such that's just going to explain it all. And if you were to just nail that, then you could do away with all the fragmentation. I mean, there are some incidents on the backtrack that have definitely been more detrimental to our spiritual decline than others, but we're trying to target all that specifically is not what we're attempting to do here at level 4. We're getting a handle on this concept of confronting the past in general. So there's really not one single way of which to run a process for confronting the past. So I mean, it's the idea behind it, is so old, on some of the most ancient writings. It's one of the reasons people used to go to the temples in the ancient Near East and Mesopotamia and so forth. So, but we're going to just go through these steps. They're lettered, and you basically would want to, I'm going to just focus on those flying solo at this point, so we can get done with this lesson. So you just want to record the answers in your flight log, the journal that you've been keeping for this. So step A, identify the incident. So simply spot the incident on your track, or the past, and identify it with a label. To begin with something simple and presumably non-restimulative, we're going to use an example of getting the mail yesterday, just for the sake of this lesson, okay? So step B, spot when the incident occurred. If you can't spot the timing directly, determine it as closely as you can. Consider ranges of time and see what feels correct. If it happened a long time ago, sometimes it's easier to consider it in terms of its order of magnitude, such as how many years or decades. Be as concise as possible with these steps because it'll contribute to how clearly you can bring an incident into view as it is. So for our example, you might spot the exact time you started walking to the mailbox. Okay? So step C, spot the duration of the incident. Determine how long, as a time frame, the incident lasted. This helps improve recall accuracy. For our example, we might spot a 10-second duration of walking to the mailbox. Okay? So spot the location of the incident. That's step D. Determine exactly where the incident took place. At the very least, for older or more obscure incidents, try to get a sense of the direction and distance it was from your present location. In our example, we might have spotted the location of the mailbox. Okay? So, step E, spot the size of space that the incident took place in. This helps provide a background for which the incident will be viewed. Did it take place in a large space outdoors or a small room? Or did it happen across many miles? For our example, we spot the spatial area of the yard between the front door and the mailbox, a walked path of approximately 100 feet. Step F, close your eyes. And this is obviously going to complete your preliminary written steps. Now, move to the beginning of the incident is step G. Direct your attention to the actual time when the incident happened. Recreate the beginning point of your experience of the incident as if the scenery is all around you, as if you were actually there again. In our example, one might spot standing at the front door looking out across the yard at the mailbox. Step H, move through the incident. Do your best to completely re-experience the incident. See what you can notice or perceive about everything that happened in it. Step I, open your eyes, write down what happened, what you noticed or perceived. Record everything that happened and anything you perceive. This is done to see it as external and separate from yourself. For example, we might record that we walked across the yard, reached the mailbox, opened it, and found it empty. Other perceptions, or facets or things noticed could include the weather, the smells, if there's animals present, and so forth. Now, step J is to repeat steps F through I. Okay? So you just open your eyes to, record. So now close your eyes, move to the beginning of the incident, move through the incident again. Okay? So you just run the incident again. When you get to the written part, you just record any of the new details that you may have noticed this time. After running the incident a couple times, the seeker should be able to tell if the fragmented charge associated with the incident is being processed out, or if it's getting more solid and difficult to confront. So you should be able to tell after a few passes. If the fragmented charge is being properly processed out, then some new details should emerge that you didn't notice on the first run, or some of the details might rearrange themselves to be more in line with truth. In either case, the actual impact of the incident should begin to weaken, and it, or seem, kind of unimportant. It no longer has that emotional, it's no longer packing that punch. So, if the incident, however, seems like it's getting more solid, or it's heavier, or it feels more difficult to run, then, kind of like when, confronting the contents is making you feel worse about it or something, then kind of like what we found, and we've talked about this before, then there's earlier data, like from a prior incident, or even an earlier beginning point of the same incident that you're running, and that needs to be run. So for our mailbox example, it's not very stimulative of fragmentation, but if it were, and we were having a hard time of doing it, then we'd look for either an earlier beginning point of that incident or an earlier incident that also included a mailbox or going to get the mail. Perhaps the real beginning of the incident was the decision to go out to get the mail, while you were still inside and not standing outside the front door. This would change the spatial area, it would change the duration, it would change other data that would be required, to run the incident. So as you confront an incident from the past using systematic processing, it should become easier. If that's not happening and you can't find an earlier beginning point of the incident, then simply looking at or stirring up the incident may have re-stimulated earlier and deeper fragmentation. So the only solution is really to spot or identify the earlier one. And this is actually, again, we're doing systematically what happens generally to people unknowingly on their, this happens, on an unknowing basis all the time in everyday life. So we're treating it knowingly and handling it, confronting it, analyzing it, processing it out. But this is how fragmentation gets re-stimulated and validated in everyday life, and then our reality and the reality of this existence becomes more solid. With further layers of consideration and agreement about what's all taking place there. So, okay, still doing good on time. So, if an earlier instance being re-stimulated, its virtual presence is usually right there, kind of almost behind the incident that you're looking at. So if it doesn't come into view right away, usually you can get some sense or feeling or impression about it. It's even possibly something, more obscure, such as like an earlier lifetime, but when just starting out on level 4, the only reason to really run incidents from past lives is if something comes up while processing your present one. So And whenever you find an earlier beginning point or incident, then you start with step A, and you do the whole thing over again. Now let's talk about this elusive step K. No, it's not elusive. It's just the last step. Step K, defragmentation. So it's important to note that heavily charged fragmentation has a tendency to alter and change the apparent is factor of an incident. We call it, fragmentation for a reason. So it has a tendency to distort the data that is recalled or considered when viewing or attempting to confront something that has a lot of charge, or a heavily charged, like, fragmented imprint or mental image of a past experience. So this is why we kind of covered some of this ahead of time. So if the content or sequence of events keeps shifting around, you're still dealing with it has changed. Okay, this means you should keep running it until the data seems to settle down one way or another. Although the general rule is to run whatever comes up in processing, the data being perceived may be quite inaccurate, while the area is still heavily charged. So if you're still encountering an incident as changed, then it can't be properly confronted as it is, right? So you're finished with this process when the incident or earlier incident is completely processed out. This means there is no longer a mental charge or emotional turbulence attached to the incident, or any of the thoughts and considerations of the incident. So the event itself it's not actually forgotten, and I think or erased from memory. I think some have misunderstood what we were doing with this, especially a few years ago. The mental imagery could still be recreated and dissolved at will, but the key here is at will. And so the alpha spirit has to be convinced that it could create something again. To do that, it needs to be able to confront that creation, and then it can let go of the compulsive hold on it, and then we can be free of this stuff. So for example, if our personal survival were dependent on the information found in books, then an individual would only compulsively carry around those physical copies of books that they didn't already know. If the material were memorized or known, but if, and you could just recreate it at will. You could almost write the book out yourself. You wouldn't need to carry it around. So the reason we would want to carry so much of the rest of this stuff around with us is because we don't actually know it, and because we're kind of like keeping it around for whatever reasons. And again, because if it was within the realm of known and it was properly defragmented, we would still have that information and we could pull it up at will. It wouldn't be something we had to actually suppress, or it wouldn't be something that was just reactively blasting us in the face every time we confront everyday life. So you see what we're trying to do here. Now, as a seeker progresses further on the pathway, it's possible to get nearly instantaneous defragmentation simply by actually looking or confronting with high power actual awareness. You get relief just on the proper inspection of whatever the fragmenting thing is, because suddenly you see it for what it is. Oh, okay. It's no longer a mystery. It's no longer confusion. It's no longer something that you need to be working against or holding against or suppressing. No extra extraneous energy or whatever needs to be tied up in its treatment. So that's basically what we're working towards. But more often than not, especially while working on the pathway to ascension, process, it's the seekers. You're probably going to have to run the incident, completely through and spot whatever you can notice and so forth, quite a bit before defragmentation actually occurs. And so you just kind of work this up and practice with it, and eventually it'll just become second nature to you, because this is a innate ability of the spirit. This is all part of the inherent creative ability of the spirit. Both us getting entrapped and the defragmentation of it is all within our ability. That's what makes this possible. So Once a seeker reaches an endpoint on the processing as given in this lesson, the final more advanced step of the defragmentation procedure is to spot any considerations or decisions that were made at the time of the incident. This means, or as a result of the incident. Usually right around the time of it, when it happened, what afterwards or so forth, because really the fragmentation that we're experiencing as a result of those considerations, and this might be a bit to reach at, or on the first pass through the course, but it's not very hard to just spot that. So once you've gone through and you've been able to confront and treat the information there as a further step, see how, because that was, again, that's also within your ability to control, decide, and determine. So once you can pinpoint when you actually, because nobody can educate you about that or tell you, oh, well, remember when you agreed to so-and-so. In this case, this is something that the individual did themselves and then, of course, buried knowledge in some way of. So when you can, or blocked out, or just chose to ignore. So whatever that the thing happened, it's confronted now. What did you choose or decide, or how did that decision, how did the decision that you made as a result of that affect future things? And then you start to get to that point of total defragmentation. So if you're going to be, again, solo piloting, it's better to work with these kind of the uncharged incidents until you're kind of well practiced in just the technique, all of those A through K steps of beta defragmentation. And again, that's Pathway Ascension Volume 2 now is where we start introducing Level 4. So, and that is almost the pinnacle, confronting this process that I just described. This is basically the pinnacle of what Level 4 represents, and the ability to confront the past and defragment it while still using, the preventative fundamentals and the processing steps you've learned before, and being able to handle various areas. This is really where all of it's going to come to a head, and separate those that know it only, those that know it just on an intellectual book basis versus those that have a handle of all this in practice. But we've laid it all out there for you and made it really, really easy this time. My only apology is how long it took, but to get here, to get to this point of being able to make it so simple and make it such a brief, because really, for what we're treating, I wouldn't say that this 20 hours of lecture and workshops has been excessive to get to this point. So. So start with that's why we use the mailbox example, or if you want to do something that's a little bit more, with actual pain incidents, you could do something that's a little more trivial, like stubbing your toe, and of course with all of these examples, like the mailbox or stubbing a toe, you're going to have there's likely to be many occurrences of that similar incident. So you don't actually have to work backwards one by one with each one. In fact, when you're doing defragmentation, you try to really spot the earliest incident available for recall. And then in running that, you may discover a new earliest one, but you don't need to actually work each individual time it happened back. See, that's where we've been able to actually make great strides in defragmentation. And as you elevate your ability to confront, you're able to kind of knock out larger chunks of that. So defragmenting each time, defragmenting the idea, stubbing your toe, we'll use that because it's not as stimulative. So to defragment the effects of that and decisions made as a result and all so forth does not require targeting every single incident along one spiritual existence that such an incident occurred. It's just, we're working from what's, available. If an earlier one comes up, we don't need to look for anything in between. We just go to that point, and if that suddenly brings this one up, then we work from that point. So it's easy to, basically the line, the charge on the line, the turbulence, the spiritual on the zoo line from whatever point it's handled from onward is where it's going to be defragmented. Anything that's still behind it is, or buried or not known or not treated yet, is still going to be there on the line. So an individual is working up to only, you know, a certain point of what is within, you know, their tolerance to handle at each given pass or each given time running through an incident, or whatever it may be. So in doing it this way, you know, I mean, I know we've played with it and tested it at the Systemology Society. I've heard reports from people, you know, internationally using the materials, you know, as in their published form. But for those still yet to you know, hop on the pathway, so to speak, or take up the pathway, this is really the best chance humanity has for incrementally working its way out of its issues. So now, the random aches and pains of life, they usually are a result of, you know, re-stimulation of earlier incidents. So, you know, rather than handling or processing a condition, you know, what we really target with our defragmentation is incidents that are connected to, you know, a condition. So a seeker doesn't use systematic processing, for example, to run an aching toe. They instead would run, for example, you know, impacts to the toe. You know, running a simple pain might even bring you to confront a major accident or event, in which case you'd handle it, you know, the incident with the full procedure that we went through, steps A through K. So the heaviest imprint fragmentation develops within, usually, you know, we talked before about how really not much within this lifetime can have the impact to fragment us in the way that has happened in previous existences or higher powered universes, or when things were a little more active. In this particular universe, or in this particular lifetime of the human condition, really any of the imprint fragmentation that freshly develops or gets encoded within this lifetime is during periods of what we refer to as biological unconsciousness, which means literally being unconscious. That's why we don't refer to hidden areas of the mind or whatnot as unconscious or anything, but literal biological unconsciousness. So this is, you know, this is when we're talking about, you know, an area that's very closely tied to accidents, physical trauma, medical operations, and the like. So it's also tied to very deep, you know, chains of fragmentation that run, you know, very long, extend far beyond this lifetime. So just improving your awareness and your ability to confront any area will really bring more into view. And so just be patient with it. Don't push too hard. And, you know, these techniques we presented in this course might just surprise you. So let's see, very briefly before we finish up this lesson here, just some notes on handling loss. So another one of my little scriptural bits. In the beginning, you know, an alpha spirit is quite godlike in its creative ability. And eventually the lack of value with things being so easily created and destroyed becomes rather boring. So when something can be created into infinity, there's really nothing to make this, you know, more valuable or interesting than that, you know, and until we begin to assign some kind of significances to things. So this idea of significances or uniquenesses enters into the consideration. So loss actually emerges much earlier, further back on one's personal track than even the idea of pain, in terms of being a source of potential fragmentation. Pain is more of a reactive mechanism that developed, you know, really to give warning of a potential loss. In the case of a human body, the alpha spirit's forgotten its own creative ability, and of course is dependent on, you know, the body. You know, I mean, creative ability, I mean, like failing to be able to create one at will and just use that. But there's many reactive mechanisms in place that kind of protect against this loss. So, you know, and keep in mind the Alpha Spirit too is still unknowingly creating a lot of these mechanisms. So now, in additional more advanced passes through this course material, you can just see how far these techniques can go. For example, you can run past deaths from the viewpoint of self as an alpha spirit and confront the loss of bodies. And this will actually start to directly open up wider considerations and awareness of the backtrack prior to this lifetime. So you can process out the loss of former civilizations and even earlier universes that you once experienced. So, and you may discover that there's many other potential applications for the kind of processing education that we offer on the professional course, and all of it hopefully to help you assist in reaching further, because here the limit's only infinity. So that should get you in handling confronting the past, and that is the primary technique that is used for the Pathway Ascension professional course that directly targets the past, the fragmenting of the past, handling imprints, and so forth. So we will continue in the next lesson, lesson 10, lifting the veils, and will be our final filmed lecture, and we'll complete lesson 4 education in that one. So thank you.
The Joshua Tree Imprint, JFI Publications, in conjunction with Mardukite Academy and the Systemology Society, present the single greatest breakthrough of the 21st century for all humanity, the perfection of a new standard systemology, a complete map for the way out from the bottom to the top, and your key to being an ascended master in this lifetime. Everything you need is contained in 3 progressive, self-guiding courses: the Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course, the Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, and the Keys to the Kingdom Advanced Training Course. And each should be studied and applied in their intended sequence and order as displayed in this video. All 3 courses combined are available as 5 standard hardcover volumes, but also as 33 installments, since each single course lesson is also available individually as a pocket-sized manual. The Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course includes Being More Than Human, Realities in Agreement, Windows to Experience, Ancient Systemology, A History of Systemology, and Systemology Processing. The Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, including processing levels 0 through 6, includes in Volume 1, Increasing Awareness, Thought and Emotion, Clear Communication, Handling Humanity, Free Your Spirit, Escaping Spirit Traps, Eliminating Barriers, and Conquest of Illusion. The Pathway to Ascension Volume 2 includes Confronting the Past, Lifting the Veils, Spiritual Implants, Games and Universes, Spiritual Energy, Spiritual Machinery, The Arcs of Infinity, and Alpha Thought. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 7 in Volume 1 includes The Secret of Universes, Games, Goals, and Purposes, The Jewel of Knowledge, Implanted Universes, and the supplementals Systemology Biofeedback and Systemology Procedures. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 8 in Volume 2 includes Entities and Fragments, Spiritual Perception, Mastering Ascension, Advancing Systemology, and the AT Supplement Systemology Piloting. All titles are available from your favorite bookseller. Explore new standard systemology today, and may you never be the same.